Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM, where we continue our discussion on postnatal depression. Remember, this is a live discussion, so if you want to put a comment or a question to the panel, please call in. The number is on your screens now. So mashallah, we discussed various things, about whether we can actually be prepared for postnatal depression and also distinguishing some of the symptoms. But, kind of moving on from there, are there certain, social groups or ethnic groups that are more susceptible to postnatal depression, Sister Nusrat?
I think with regard to groups that are more susceptible to postnatal depression, it's not. I think it's more of an experience and social aspect as opposed to ethnic, because essentially it can happen to anybody irrespective of their ethnic makeup or of ethnicity. So that kind of idea that certain ethnic groups are predisposed really just needs to go out the window. But according to the NHS, teenage mothers are especially at risk, as 1 in 10 mothers get postnatal depression. But for teenagers, the rate's actually 3 times more than older mothers. And this actually was even explored in 2013 by a BBC documentary aired on this issue. And this was actually featuring Stacey Solomon, who gives her account of these kind of things happening, i.e. young mothers being at risk. So even psychotherapist Dr. Amanda Jones talks about how traumatic experiences may exacerbate the likelihood of postnatal...
What about single parents, single mothers?
Obviously, with the idea of people coping as well, being a single parent, it may make it slightly harder, but that in and of itself does not make you sometimes more susceptible in that
I think
sense.
I agree with you there in the terms of, it's more of social factors that play into why certain things, people will be more susceptible to postnatal depression.
Absolutely.
So if you have, an unsettled life, for example, financially you're not stable, all these things will play a part into feeding these things.
Class plays a factor. So, if someone's not working or earning or able to support themselves, they may be able to, limited, but also knowledge and educational background. But also, if you think about the ideas around also previous experience of traumatic-like events, whether childhood or adulthood. So when you're feeling vulnerable, you've already got the primary biological depression, then you have the what we call psychological secondary. It's almost like depression about depression, and also how you cope, how you manage to recover through traumatic life. Even as a Muslim, we think about being tested and how do we survive that, and what resource do we draw on that?
We can handle the situation we're in. We have to always remind ourselves, I can handle this because Allah put me in this situation. Allah gave me this child. I can handle this. It's difficult.
It's difficult, but sometimes
the reward is immense.
I find that sometimes, while we try to kind of internalize it and think like, what, subhanAllah, this is a test from Allah and I'm going to get through this test and I'm going to be patient and work through it. Sometimes even that in itself can be isolating, because the fact that you're going through it alone just makes it even more difficult to cope with. So while, yes, some things might be a test from Allah, that doesn't mean that you have to go through it alone. That's why you have family, you have friends, you ask for that support, because Allah, talks about, certain friendships, and Allah talks about, having good people around you, not to isolate yourself.
There are support groups. There are health professionals who can help you, support groups. Just reach out. Reach out to someone.
What exacerbates the situation as well is if a person has pre-existing mental health problems as well. And if you're going through that and postnatal depression and people just don't understand, it makes it difficult. And I think the community as well, sometimes within the Muslim community, we tend to acknowledge sometimes depression in its abstract, but we don't tend to actually do something to try and ameliorate the problem. And when someone does come with a problem, they're normally fobbed off again with philosophical or religious text, which doesn't actually show you how to impact your life in that sense. And I'm sorry to say, there are some members of the Muslim community that do not tend to show that sometimes that amount of compassion, where they have about just as much compassion as a school of piranhas. I'm sorry to say.
That is one point, that maybe we don't have that sort of support, but maybe it comes down to the fact, that they don't have enough knowledge about what it actually is, because it's one thing to say, it's a test from Allah, cope with it, but what does that actually mean for the person in their daily life?
When we say being tested, it means explore it, unpack it. It doesn't mean just ignore it and just sit with it and be stoic and that's it. It means engage with what the test is or the process is. What is it making you think about? How are you viewing it? How are you coping? Who should you discuss this with? It's like any test in anything we do in life. We have to explore this. It's not something you just suffer through it.
Of very hard times of sadness, not depression, alhamdulillah, but I've been through periods of a sadness. And I know how hard it is to take care of a child then, because you can barely take care of yourself.
Yes.
It's very difficult to wake up in the morning and do everything for this small human beings that you have to take care of.
Absolutely,
When
and that
you
kind of-
yourself
yeah.
is
Absolutely.
feeling very low.
Absolutely. That kind of leads on to the next thing, which is, you know, we talk a lot about how this affects the mother and how she copes with it. But how does this affect, you know, the baby in terms of like how the baby is cared for?
Well, that's really important because, you know, having worked in the NHS and local authority in a sort of a social service set of contexts as well, one of the things we look at is mother's capacity and also we look at also issues around self-harm. Women tend to feel sometimes thoughts like they don't want to live. They've said, you know, they want to kill themselves or don't feel like they're attached to their baby. They can also get quite angry with their baby. You know, we have cases where parents have neglected and harmed their kids. So it can get very extreme. This is obviously acute. I'm talking about acute and I don't want to worry people, but that's, if there is acute signs, then that's where the family or the partner could observe and see if their partner or wife is behaving slightly abnormally, you know, not their normal pattern, you know, very negative thinking. And so they may need at this point to take them to the GP for safety of the woman and the child as well. And the other thing is women, we're not always good at helping ourselves. We tend to be quite, you know, the moods and the hormone comes and we can get quite moody. We don't recognize the symptoms. If we don't understand ourselves, how can we help other people to understand us?
Absolutely. Sister, we have a caller, Sister Maya. Assalamu alaikum, sister. What's your question?
Wa alaikum salam. Basically, I had a 3-month-old daughter recently, and I've been starting to feel really low. I don't know if that am I going into depression or what? Unfortunately, I had C-section with her, and I nearly lost my life after. But I recovered. Yeah, alhamdulillah, I recovered well from it. But recently, I've been feeling quite low, quite isolated, and because I'm a Reva, I don't have many people around me at the moment.
That's isolating.
SubhanAllah, Sister Nasima.
And again, I think thank you for that. It's a very isolating process. So I would say, you know, what we talked about earlier is there friends and family around, and clearly in this case maybe there isn't. Then you may also have to go out of your normal and go to see professional help. I mean, we talked about there isn't much apart from the health visitor, but you know, now there are Muslim psychotherapists or someone like myself who address these issues, so they can privately see someone if they think it's getting quite acute or it's going to become quite enduring, and rather than it becoming something that you kind of feeling time to time for that day and you kind of think I can manage it.
Also,
you can do your self-check, you know, you kind of know things are getting quite bad. You have to be quite genuine.
But it's good, mashallah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very commendable for the sister to actually call in
Absolutely.
and say, you know what, this is how I'm feeling.
That
first
takes
step is
courage,
to-
thank you.
The first step is to acknowledge that you have, you're sad or you have a problem. But sadness does not mean depression. I've been
No.
through periods of sadness. It doesn't mean you are depressed.
No.
You have to
There's a
give
distinction
it a
between the two as well.
long term. You can probably take yourself out of
Absolutely.
it. hopefully, yes.
Sister Nasima,
Yes.
what advice would you give Sister Maya now who's
Well,
just called
Sister
in?
Maya is really admirable and courageous. She's starting to actually become aware of some of her experiences, so that's good. I think she should really regulate herself and monitor how often and how it shows. So is it sleep, food? Is she neglecting herself? Is she feeling like not wanting to be with the baby? So, you know, those kind of things, and take them to her GP or her health visitor if she has one, saying these are some of the things she's thinking about. How can they work with her? Or indeed, if in each borough they may also they will have psychological talking therapy, so someone who could help. But also bear in mind that as a Muslim woman, her world frame and views and her ideas will be different, and that's what she would need to make sure that gets voiced in the work, whoever she's referred to, or indeed come and see me, and you know, I can try and see if I could help in any way.
And sister, for the viewers who are watching at home, who may not necessarily be the mothers, but the family members of those who have recently become mothers, what advice can we give them in order to support or maybe even recognise some of these signs?
I think if there are other women who's been parent themselves, they may be easier to go to and say, you've been a mother, I'm experiencing this, have you ever experienced this, or am I feeling this is different? So talking to whether it's the mother-in-law, sister-in-law, or whoever, her own sisters and mothers, asking them if they've been through the process, that she's experiencing that. So that's often quite a comforting and a safe way to check out what she's going through. And then, you know, friends as well, you know, saying I'm experiencing this, and also then, as I said, you know, do the self-monitoring and reviewing, you know, like take some time out every day and just ask yourself, is it becoming quite unbearable? Is it really getting in the way of her
Is
functioning?
this consistent?
Yes, and if she thinks, no, this is really not just one day in the week I felt like that, it's every day, every morning, every evening, you know, you kind of start to notice a pattern emerges. And then this is where at this point she could ask her family members, this is really becoming a pattern and it's quite consistent and becoming quite enduring. And then go and see that obviously it's the health visitor and the GP to say, I'm experiencing this, is there any support for me?
And what about family members? What can they do to support the sisters?
Well, they can directly offer her time to just sit with her and say, how are you feeling today? What do you think you've noticed? Just, you know, giving time to so that she could express her feelings. Oftentimes, it's half the time being able to express.
It's about being able to listen.
And to express that this is what I'm going through.
Yeah. We have Sister Samina on the line. Sister Samina, assalamu alaikum.
Yes, walaikum salam.
Sister, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I've had 6 children myself.
MashaAllah.
My youngest is 10 now. My eldest is 25. And just thinking back, you know, I've just got a few comments to make about what I think would help postnatal depression. One thing I would say is that I would appeal to family members to do their bit. Some communities, we've got cultures where the men don't take that much interest, or they feel that they don't have to be that involved in the family. So men, brothers, you know, mothers, sisters, they need to do their bit because that support network is very important. The other thing, very quickly, I want to say is that community. Try to live in a community where, you know, you have people around you.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Samina. Jazakallah khair. Sorry, I have to cut you off there, but alhamdulillah, she really made a good point there, which is the men in the family have to be involved because it's true, some just don't show any interest. It could be a personal thing or it could be because they just don't have the education. So alhamdulillah, bringing everyone in the family, making it an inclusive experience. So jazakallah khair for that, sisters. Accepting that there is a problem is the first step towards healing and resolving this condition, and there are many avenues of help out there. It is a temporary condition, so those feelings of isolation, weakness and irritability won't last any longer than they need to. Suffering from postnatal depression certainly does not mean that you do not love your child enough or that you are not a good mother. This is just an adjustment period that many women go through, and inshallah you will gain much good with the right help from health professionals and seeking assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, jazakallah khair, sisters, for that discussion. Inshallah, we'll be back for our third segment where we'll be taking a look at a misconception of Islam. See you soon. Assalamu alaikum.